All right, so you want to know what it takes to be a correctional services manager. Well, you've come to the right place. We're diving deep into this career path. And let me tell you, these sources you sent are fascinating.
Yeah, it's way more than just overseeing inmates, you know?
Right. I mean, what I think correctional services manager, I think, well, corrections. But running a small city keeps popping up in these sources. Is that really what it's like?
It's a surprisingly accurate way to put it. You're not just dealing with security, you've got budgets, staff training, building maintenance, making sure everything's legal. It's a lot to juggle.
Okay, so running a small city. Break it down for me. What are some actual tasks a correctional services manager handles daily?
Well, security is obviously huge. But on any given day, you might be reviewing incident reports, holding disciplinary hearings, working with probation officers, even things like negotiating contracts for inmate services.
Wow, so there's a lot of variety.
Oh, yeah. One source even talked about a correctional services manager who had to deal with a whole gang situation inside the facility. Talk about high stakes.
Intense. So you need some serious expertise, but also like people skills, right?
Absolutely. It's that challenging but rewarding thing you see everywhere in these sources. You're dealing with a lot of people who are going through it, you know? Trauma, mental health issues.
So empathy plays a big role. It's not just about maintaining order, but understanding where they're coming from.
Exactly. This one researcher, they actually argued that correctional services managers are in a unique position. They can advocate for inmates, help them not end up back in the system.
Reduce recidivism, right?
Yeah. It's about figuring out why someone ends up in trouble and trying to address that, not just, locking them up and that's it.
That makes a lot of sense. But before we get too deep into that, you mentioned the legal side of things earlier. What kind of legal stuff does a correctional services manager have to deal with?
Oh man, where to even start? Inmate rights are always changing, health and safety regulations, labor laws for the staff. One wrong move and you could have a lawsuit on your hands or put people in danger.
Sounds like a lot of pressure,
It definitely takes a certain type of person to do this job, that's for sure.
but it's a crucial part of the justice system, clearly. It really does sound like a tough job, but important.
Yeah.
So how do you even get started in a career like this? What are we talking education-wise?
Well, most of these sources mention needing at least a bachelor's degree.
Okay, so a 4-year degree. But is there like a specific correctional services major or something?
Actually, it's pretty interesting. There are specific corrections programs out there, but these sources highlight that you can get there from a lot of different degrees, like criminal justice, psychology, sociology, even business administration came up a few times.
Business administration. Wait, hold on. How does that work?
Remember how we talked about managing budgets and all the resources and the staff? That's basically business administration, right? You're running a whole operation, even if it's in a correctional facility.
Oh, that makes sense when you put it like that. So it's not just security. You need psychology, some law, business skills. Wow.
Yeah. And it's not even just about knowing the stuff. You need the right personality for this job, you know? The sources all agree on that. You gotta be a good communicator, handle conflicts well, think critically, all that good stuff.
Okay, let's say you're just starting out. You're a correctional officer. What would a typical day look like for them based on these sources?
One former correctional officer described it as always being alert, making sure everyone's following the rules, and even building relationships with inmates, even just little things, just to keep things calm.
Sounds like a delicate balance to strike.
Oh, for sure. This officer said being able to de-escalate situations and read people really well, that's crucial.
Interesting. So how do you move up from correctional officer?
From what I'm seeing in these sources, it usually goes correctional officer to sergeant, then lieutenant, and then finally correctional services manager. And as you climb the ladder, you get more responsibility and it becomes less about direct supervision and more about strategy.
Okay, I get it. So give me an example. How would a correctional sergeant's day-to-day differ from a lieutenant's?
So a sergeant might say something like, I supervise the staff, make sure everyone's following procedure, and manage the inmates' daily activities. They're kind of like the bridge between the officers and the higher-ups.
Okay, so they have to deal with the staff and the inmates. Got it. What about a lieutenant?
One source I was looking at actually interviewed a bunch of lieutenants. They said it's more about putting policies into practice across the whole facility, working with probation and parole officers, and dealing with any big emergencies, big picture stuff.
Wow, so it definitely sounds like a lot more responsibility at that level. And then finally, you reach the top, correctional services manager. What would they say their job is based on what you've seen?
Probably something along the lines of, I set the goals for the entire facility, manage the budget, make sure we're following all the rules and being ethical. Oh, and we're also trying to reduce recidivism, the whole 9 yards.
That's a lot to have on your plate. Sounds like you really have to work your way up, learn as you go.
100%. You're not going to walk in off the street and become a correctional services manager. It takes time, dedication. You really got to be passionate about it, both the security side and, working with the people.
And speaking of working with the people, we talked a little about rehabilitation earlier, like those reentry programs. There was that one about teaching inmates to code, right? What was that about?
So this coding program, it's actually been crazy successful. One of the news articles you sent, it said they've had way fewer people ending up back in prison.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing we need to see more of. That article even mentioned some of the people who went through the program. They actually got jobs as coders after they got out.
That's incredible. Proof that rehabilitation can work, It's not just about punishment, it's about giving people a chance.
Right. It's a whole different way of thinking about corrections. And that actually brings us to something pretty important if you're serious about becoming a correctional services manager.
Oh,
The interview. The interview. Now, those could be nerve-wracking. What kinds of questions should someone be prepared for?
well, luckily for you, these sources had a lot of good info about that. They all agree that you're going to get asked about dealing with tough situations, which makes sense, right? You're working in a high-stress environment. They need to know you can stay calm, you can de-escalate things.
So, like, tell me about a time you had to deal with a difficult inmate, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And you got to have a good answer ready, a real example. Explain what happened, what you did, and how it turned out.
So they see how you handle problems, how you communicate, all that.
Yep. And they'll want to know about your leadership skills, too. Because you're not just managing inmates, you're managing staff, right?
Yeah.
How would you keep your staff safe? You'll definitely get asked that one.
Ooh, yeah. What are they looking for in an answer like that?
They want to hear that you understand security, that you can build trust with your team, that you're all about training and making sure everyone's up to speed.
That's where something like RoleCatcher would come in handy, right? We were talking about that earlier.
Oh, absolutely. The sources, they couldn't stop talking about how great RoleCatcher is for interview prep. That AI stuff is really impressive. You know how it analyzes job descriptions, figures out the key skills. It'll help you come up with answers that use those key words and sound super professional.
So it's like having a personal interview coach right in your pocket.
Basically, it'll help you sound confident, prepared. It'll even give you feedback on how you're speaking.
That's wild. Okay, so to wrap this whole thing up, someone's listening to this, they're thinking about this career path. Maybe they're a little intimidated, maybe they're excited. What's the one thing you want them to take away from all this?
I'd say if you really want to make a difference, if you want a job that's challenging but also really rewarding, if you're passionate about helping people, about making the justice system better, then yeah, Correctional Services Manager, it's worth looking into.
It's not easy, but the impact you can have is huge.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.